The anxious headlines you see about Iran aren't a new story. They were written down with startling accuracy more than 2,500 years ago. Those same ancient texts that prophesied Israel's return also pinpoint modern-day Iran as a key player in a final world-altering war. To truly grasp how shocking the prophecy about Iran's future is, you must first understand its astonishing past. Today, the name Iran brings up images of hostility toward Israel, but if you journey back into the Old Testament, you discover a completely different story. You find that the nation we call Iran, then the mighty Persian Empire, wasn't an enemy of the Jewish people. In fact, for a critical moment in history, Persia was their greatest ally, their divinely appointed rescuer, and their liberator. This story of friendship begins with one of the most incredible prophecies in the entire Bible, found in the book of Isaiah, written in the 8th century BC. At that time, the kingdom of Judah faced certain doom. Prophets warned that God would allow the brutal Babylonian Empire to conquer Jerusalem, destroy the sacred Temple of Solomon, and drag the Jewish people into a long, bitter exile. It was a message of utter despair. Yet in the middle of that darkness, God gave Isaiah a promise of hope so specific and so far in the future that it defies all logic. In Isaiah chapters 44 and 45, God declares that after 70 years of exile, he will raise up a foreign pagan king to deliver his people, and God called him out by name. Through the prophet Isaiah, God said, "I say of Cyrus, he is my shepherd, and he shall perform all my pleasure, saying to Jerusalem, you shall be built, and to the temple, your foundation shall be laid." Consider how impossible that sounded. This prophecy was written about 150 years before a king named Cyrus was even born. The nation he would rule, Persia, wasn't a world power yet. The temple was still standing. Babylon wouldn't destroy it for another century. Yet God, speaking from outside of time, named the man and spelled out his exact mission: to rebuild the city and the temple that hadn't even been destroyed. He calls this pagan king my shepherd and even my anointed, a title reserved for those specially chosen for God's purposes. And just as God declared, history bent its knee to prophecy. In 539 BC, Cyrus the Great, leading the Medo-Persian army, conquered the seemingly invincible empire of Babylon. The Jewish people, exiled for decades, suddenly had a new ruler. And one of the very first things King Cyrus did was issue a decree that shocked the ancient world. You can read it in the first verses of the book of Ezra. Thus says Cyrus, king of Persia, "The Lord, the God of heaven, has given me all the kingdoms of the earth, and he has charged me to build him a house at Jerusalem. Whoever is among you of all his people, may his God be with him, and let him go up to Jerusalem and rebuild the house of the Lord, the God of Israel." This was unheard of. Conquering kings didn't just let captive people go free, but Cyrus did more. He funded their return from the royal Persian treasury and ordered that the sacred gold and silver vessels looted from the first temple be given back. This wasn't just politics. It was the direct fulfillment of Isaiah's 150-year-old prophecy, cementing Persia's role as the divine instrument of Israel's survival. This alliance continued for centuries. The prophet Daniel served at the highest levels of the Medo-Persian government, and in the famous story of Esther, a young Jewish orphan becomes the queen of Persia, married to King Xerxes. When a wicked official named Haman plotted to annihilate the Jewish people, it was Queen Esther's courage and the Persian king's authority that saved them. This entire biblical drama unfolds not in Israel, but deep inside the Persian capital. So let's be crystal clear. The Bible is unambiguous. The nation we call Iran, ancient Persia, was not a villain in Israel's story. It was a vehicle for God's salvation. This is the history, and it's this very history that makes the prophetic turn that comes next so utterly jarring. The Bible's portrait of Persia as a friend to Israel is powerful and clear. But the very same scripture that praises King Cyrus as God's shepherd also holds a dark prophecy about the nation he once ruled. The same ancient scrolls that record Persia's history as an ally also foretell its transformation into a key enemy in a final cataclysmic war against the very people it once saved. To see this, we turn from the history books to the visions of the prophet Ezekiel. Captive in Babylon during the very exile Cyrus would end, God gave Ezekiel a series of stunning visions about the future. In chapters 38 and 39, he describes a massive multinational invasion of Israel that will happen in what the Bible calls the latter days. This prophecy, often called the War of Gog and Magog, reads like a future intelligence briefing. It begins with God telling Ezekiel, "Son of man, set your face against Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Rosh, Meshech and Tubal, and prophesy against him." For centuries, scholars have identified Magog, Meshech, and Tubal as the ancient peoples who lived in the regions north of the Black and Caspian Seas, pointing directly toward the landmass of modern-day Russia. The text even specifies that this leader, Gog, will come from the far north. God then tells this northern leader, "I will turn you about and put hooks into your jaws, and I will bring you out and all your army." This is a strange image. It suggests the leader of this invasion might be reluctant, not acting on his own schedule. God himself will sovereignly hook him and drag his vast military into this conflict like reeling in a giant fish. This is not a war that happens by chance. It is a divine appointment. And then in verse 5 comes the critical piece of the puzzle, the name that connects this ancient prophecy directly to our topic today. The text lists the key allies who will join this northern-led invasion. It says, "Persia, Cush, and Put are with them, all of them with shield and helmet." There it is, in black and white. Persia, the same nation of Cyrus and Esther. The historic friend is now explicitly named as a core member of an alliance bent on Israel's destruction. The nation we know today as Iran is a central player in this end-times invasion. The prophecy goes on to name other members. Cush is the ancient name for the land south of Egypt, corresponding to modern Sudan. Put is identified with the region of modern Libya. The list continues with Gomer and Beth Togarmah, which scholars generally associate with regions in modern-day Turkey. Pause and picture the coalition Ezekiel is describing. It's a massive confederacy led by a power from the far north, Russia, joined by a major power to its south, Persia, Iran, and allied with nations from North Africa, Libya and Sudan, and the area of modern Turkey. Look at a map today. These nations form a geographic ring, a tightening circle, around the nation of Israel. This isn't a random collection of countries, it's a specific, prophesied block. Ezekiel 38:8 also gives us the timing. This will happen in the latter years, when the force will invade a land that has been brought back from the sword and gathered from many nations. It specifies they will attack the mountains of Israel, which had been a perpetual waste. This detail is crucial. The prophecy could not have been fulfilled at any other point in history. It required a time when Jewish people were scattered globally and then returned to re-establish a nation. The rebirth of Israel in 1948 set the stage for this ancient prediction to become a real-world possibility. The prophecy even seems to describe Israel as a peaceful and unsuspecting people, living without walls. Some believe this points to a future time of peace for Israel, perhaps after a major treaty. Others suggest it's about the enemy's perception that Israel, despite its military, has a peacetime mindset that makes it seem like an easy target. But the main point is undeniable. The prophet Ezekiel, 2,600 years ago, foretold a time when a restored Israel would face a massive invasion from a coalition of specific nations, and at the heart of that invading force, standing shoulder to shoulder with a leader from the far north, would be Persia, modern Iran. The friend has become the foe. The shepherd has joined the wolves. An ancient prophecy naming Persia is one thing, but connecting it with certainty to the Iran on our newsfeed requires us to bridge a 2,500-year gap. The connection isn't speculation, it's undeniable history. For millennia, the world knew that region as Persia. That was the name on the maps. But in 1935, the nation's ruler, Reza Shah Pahlavi, asked that the country be called by its native name, Iran, an ancient term meaning land of the Aryans. The switch from Persia to Iran wasn't a change of country, but a change of name. It's the same land, the same people, the same place Ezekiel was talking about. This simple historical fact is the linchpin connecting ancient prophecy to our modern world. With that link in place, the prophetic map Ezekiel described looks eerily familiar. The prophecy speaks of a leader from the far north, Russia, forming an alliance with Persia, Iran, Turkey, Libya, and Sudan. Now think about the geopolitical scene of the last decade. Who are Iran's main strategic allies? Russia and Turkey. The strategic partnership between Russia, Iran, and Turkey is a defining feature of modern geopolitics, a power bloc aimed at countering Western influence. We've seen them cooperate in Syria. Russia and Iran have deepened their military and economic ties, with Iran reportedly supplying drones to Russia in exchange for advanced military technology and diplomatic cover. The overall trend is one of convergence, driven by a shared opposition to the United States and Israel. What we are witnessing is nations, for their own political reasons, moving into an alignment that looks shockingly similar to the one the prophet foretold. Is it just a coincidence that Iran's closest modern allies are the very nations listed in Ezekiel 38? The prophecy also hints at the motive. Ezekiel 38:12 says the coalition comes to capture spoil and to seize plunder. In the ancient world, that meant gold and livestock. What could it mean today? Some point to Israel's massive offshore natural gas fields, a source of immense wealth that could challenge Russia's energy dominance. Others point to Israel's status as a tech superpower whose intellectual property is a treasure in itself. But the motivation likely runs deeper. For the current regime in Iran, the motive is ideological. Its leaders have repeatedly called for Israel to be wiped off the map. This isn't just political rhetoric. It is a core belief. They see Israel as an illegitimate state, a cancer in the heart of the Islamic world, providing a motive that goes beyond plunder to a desire for annihilation. And of course, there's Iran's nuclear program. The world has watched nervously as Iran pursues the technology for nuclear weapons. A nuclear-armed Iran could be the catalyst, the power that emboldens the Ezekiel 38 coalition to believe they can actually win against Israel. The recent military strikes and counterstrikes have brought this shadow war into the open, showing just how close the region is to a major war. When you connect the historical dots, examine the current alliances, and understand the deep motivations, the conclusion is hard to ignore. The 2,600-year-old prophecy of Ezekiel is not some dusty relic. It is a living document, a prophetic blueprint that appears to be unfolding with breathtaking accuracy in our lifetime. While Ezekiel 38 is the most famous prophecy about Iran's future, it isn't the only one. Another equally stunning prophecy is hidden in the book of Jeremiah, and it adds a surprising layer to Iran's ultimate destiny. It concerns a specific region of ancient Persia known as Elam. Elam was an ancient kingdom in what is now southwestern Iran. This region is critically important to modern Iran. It's home to a huge portion of its oil reserves and has been a center for its nuclear and missile programs. Jeremiah's prophecy against Elam is stark and unfolds in three parts: military disarmament, divine judgment, and astonishing restoration. First, God declares he will neutralize Elam's military. In Jeremiah 49:35, the Lord says, "Behold, I will break the bow of Elam, the mainstay of their might." Elamite archers were legendary. The bow was their national symbol of military power. To break the bow was to shatter the core of their strength. In a modern context, what is Iran's bow? Many interpreters see a direct parallel to its ballistic missile program and nuclear ambitions, the modern equivalent of their long-range strike capability. Second, the prophecy describes intense judgment and the scattering of its people. God says, "I will bring disaster upon them. I will send the sword after them, and I will scatter them to all those winds, and there shall be no nation to which those driven out of Elam shall not come." This speaks of a cataclysm so severe it leads to a massive refugee crisis. Following the 1979 Islamic Revolution, millions of Iranians did flee, creating a global diaspora that some see as a partial fulfillment of this. Third, God declares he will overthrow the nation's leadership. "I will set my throne in Elam and destroy their king and officials." This isn't just a regime change, it's a divine takeover. God himself will establish his authority in the heart of Iran and remove its ruling regime. If the prophecy ended there, it would be a message of pure doom. But the final verse, verse 39, contains one of the most hopeful and overlooked promises in the Old Testament. After predicting all this destruction, God makes a final declaration. "But in the latter days I will restore the fortunes of Elam, declares the Lord." In the latter days, the same end times period Ezekiel mentioned, God promises restoration for the people of Iran. Judgment is not his final word. Mercy is. Many believe we are seeing the start of this restoration today in the explosive growth of the underground Christian church in Iran. Despite living under an oppressive regime, it's widely reported that more Iranians have come to faith in the last few decades than in the previous 1,400 years combined, making it what many consider to be the fastest-growing evangelical church in the world. Many believe this is the fulfillment of Jeremiah's promise. God is restoring the fortunes of Elam by calling its people to himself. He is setting his throne in the hearts of hundreds of thousands of Iranians, creating a new spiritual reality even while the political one remains hostile. Returning to the Great War of Ezekiel 38, the stage is set. The invading coalition, led by Gog from the north with Persia as a key partner, sweeps down upon Israel. From a human perspective, the situation looks hopeless. Ezekiel describes the invading force as a mighty army, coming like a cloud to cover the land. The world will watch, expecting Israel's annihilation. The odds will seem impossible. But this war isn't about human power. It is a divine appointment designed to reveal God's power to the entire world. Just when all seems lost, God himself intervenes, and his weapons are the very forces of nature. Ezekiel 38 gives a terrifying account. God declares, "Surely in that day there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. Mountains will be thrown down, cliffs will fall, and the very ground of the battlefield will be torn apart. In the chaos, God unleashes confusion on the invading armies." Verse 21 says, "Every man's sword will be against his brother. The allied forces, panicking, will turn on each other in a frenzy of friendly fire, destroying themselves from within." The judgment doesn't stop there. God continues, "With pestilence and bloodshed I will enter into judgment with him." And finally, God rains down supernatural fire. "And I will rain on him, on his hordes, and on the many peoples who are with him, flooding rain, great hailstones, fire and brimstone." This is the climax. The entire invading army, the forces of Russia, Iran, Turkey, and their allies, is utterly annihilated, not by the Israeli military, but by the direct, overwhelming power of the God of Israel. The defeat of Gog's coalition isn't a military victory. It is a supernatural event, proving that the defender of Israel does not slumber. Why does all this happen? Why this detailed prophecy? The Bible itself gives the answer. The purpose isn't to satisfy our curiosity or to make us afraid. The purpose is revelation. In Ezekiel 38:23, God states his reason clearly. And so I will show my greatness and my holiness, and I will make myself known in the sight of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord. The entire event is orchestrated for one supreme purpose: to put the character and power of the God of the Bible on display for a watching world. In an age of doubt, God will provide an undeniable demonstration that He exists and that He is in control of the nations. For those who believe, these prophecies are not a source of anxiety, but an anchor of hope. They tell us that history isn't random chaos, but a story moving toward a promised destination. They assure us that no matter how dark the headlines get, God's purposes will be fulfilled. The point of prophecy is not to be fearful, but to be faithful. Not to be anxious, but to be aware. To understand the times we're living in, and to place our ultimate trust not in governments or armies, but in the God who wrote the beginning of history and has already written the end. If this deep dive into biblical prophecy has opened your eyes and you want to understand more about how these ancient texts shed light on our world, make sure you subscribe and click that notification bell. We're going to be exploring another incredible biblical mystery in our next video, and you won't want to miss it.